Good afternoon to you. It's 4 o'clock, time for Sports4CLE. Thanks for joining us. A special edition of Sports4CLE today. A state of the Browns, if you will, where they're at, looking forward, what might happen, and some of the things to keep an eye on. Let's welcome in Tom Withers, Associated Press reporter, longtime cover of the Cleveland Browns. So, Tom, I'm not sure how you felt. I didn't think we'd be sitting here with the record that the Browns have. I certainly thought the playoffs were a possibility. What do you think went wrong this year that kind of led us to where we're at, where the playoffs just don't look like they're going to happen?
Yeah, there's a lot, isn't there? It's there's a lot of variables, and I think more than anything else, Dave, this season was shaped by Deshaun Watson's suspension. And when the Browns decided to go after him and sign him to a fully guaranteed $230 million contract, not knowing exactly, what would happen to him from a legal standpoint and with the league, they really opened themselves up to the possibility of anything happen. And I think that more than anything else is the reason why they're on the outside looking in at the playoffs. It's very difficult to bench a franchise quarterback, if you will, and play a backup in Jacoby Brissett, who played exceedingly well, way beyond, I think, what anybody could have anticipated, maybe even Jacoby himself. So I think that more than anything else put the Browns in the position that they're in today.
Do you think that the defense, there's no other way to say it, it's been a disappointment. You can't really characterize it any other way. Are they surprised by that, do you think?
I would think that they are, yeah. Obviously the team took a big jump defensively last year under Joe Woods, and I think everybody pointed toward, okay, it's a young team and a new system. They'll figure out the bugs here and there. We can count on Myles Garrett. We got Jadeveon Clowney back. I think what they failed to do, Dave, is to realize that you need some stout defensive tackles with experience, and they were really counting on young guys in taking a huge jump this year, and that just didn't happen. In fairness to them and Joe Woods, losing 3 starting linebackers would be tough for any team. That on top of putting a young safety out there in Grant Delpit, who clearly was, a big reason why they had those early season communication issues. You lose Greg Newsome for a game or two, you lose Denzel Ward for a game or two, there goes your starting cornerbacks. I think teams also schemed them really well. I think teams did a nice job of figuring out what the Browns' weakness was, and that was clearly their inability to stop the run, and they exposed it. They would circle a particular guy on a particular play and say, let's run right at that guy, and they've got no answers, and the Browns really haven't figured that out all year. There's been a couple of games where they've done a better job of stopping the run, and I thought they did a nice job as well in the games that they've played against the Ravens and the Bengals, division games that are very important. And obviously you have more tape on those teams and you're more familiar with them, so you can probably hope to play better than against them than you do against the other teams. And the Browns did that. But yeah, some huge question marks on that defense. Obviously some areas that they're going to have to address in the offseason.
In your mind, what is the most critical area that needs to be addressed and shored up?
Yeah, I think it's that. I think it's defensive interior. I think that's both tackles and linebackers. I think you've got some good athletes at that linebacking spot. When you talk about guys like Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, who I thought was finally starting to get himself together after a couple of injuries and playing well. They decided a couple years ago, Dave, that they wanted to be a fast defense. They wanted to be a defense that would be able to contain teams like Kansas City, with Kelsey and Tyreek Hill at the time and all those weapons that Mahomes has, especially after that playoff loss. And I think they decided, we're going to be small, we're going to be fast, and that just hasn't worked. And I think you've realized there, now especially in the AFC North, which is going to traditionally be a ground and pound type of division, you've got to have some size inside. So I think it's imperative for them to find a tackle or two. You can still have some young guys on the roster and continue to develop them, the ones that you've identified as potentially long-term answers. But you've got to get bigger up front. You've got to get bigger in the middle. It may come to a situation where they have to rethink the scheme and and don't think we didn't ask Kevin Stefanski that question more than a few times this season. So it just doesn't feel like the personnel and the scheme is matching up defensively. And to me, that's by far their biggest need in the offseason.
Yeah, I would agree. It was almost like they were daring teams to run the football on them, and the team's like, okay, you want us to run it? Okay, we'll run it. Because when you look at it, the safeties are pretty good, the cornerbacks are really good, but so it's almost like, let's kind of minimize the back half because it's pretty good. Let's exploit the middle because it's a little.
Yeah. I totally agree, Dave. And when you watch teams around the league, it's like, you see these big productive tackles all over the place. And you're like, what kind of model are the Browns following here? So, again, I especially, too, when you consider, when you've got arguably the best defensive player in the AFC, if not the league, on your defensive line, I would think you would want to pair somebody up on that side of, the line with him to make him even better, to make it more challenging to block him. So again, I think it's a personnel issue. I think it's a scheme issue as well. I do think that Joe Woods, as I mentioned earlier, has been handed a lot though in terms of young players on top of injuries. Where there's been no margin for error defensively because you were playing kind of shorthanded offensively. There's also been some offensive issues as well that we can talk about, in terms of, Coach Stefanski's reluctance sometimes to stick with the running game. That's also an issue. But I think defense has to be priority 1 through 5 in the offseason.
When you look at it, do you think they're closer to being where they want to be, which is legitimate title contender, than a right around 500 record would indicate?
I do, Dave, and I was trying to talk some of my family and Browns, friends into like, hey, slow it down. During the season, I kind of felt like they were not that far away. That if not for an injury or two, a bad break, a tough call, that they would be 500 or better at this point. And I think given, as I mentioned earlier, given the circumstances with Deshaun Watson being sidelined for 11 games, I think you would take that. So, yeah, I did anticipate, I'll be honest with you, I did anticipate once the suspension came down, them having basically a 500 record because I thought it was going to be very tough for Jacoby Brissett, given the schedule. And it started out very easy, but then we got into that rough patch. It was going to be tough for him to even put together a 6-5, a 5-6 record, and that didn't happen. They were 4-7 when he was done. So I knew it was going to be tough. But I do think this team does have some of the best talent in the AFC. It's going to be interesting to see what pieces they're able to hold on to now that they don't have any first-round draft picks for the next 3 years. It's going to be even more imperative for Andrew Berry to get creative to try to plug some of those spots that we've talked about. But I do think, Dave, that they are much closer to being a title contending team. I'm not ready to go for the Super Bowl yet. I think it's more about trying to win the AFC North, which they haven't won their division since 1989. I think people forget that. I think it's more about winning that division and then taking those next steps. Never mind the fact that the AFC continues to be loaded at the top, and teams, when you talk about teams like Buffalo and Kansas City, and oh, by the way, the Cincinnati Bengals, who I think are a really good model for the Browns to follow right now.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that's fair. Do you think Joe Woods will be back? That's kind of a hot button topic. Everybody seems to assume that he's gone. Just your thoughts?
Yeah, I'll give you an answer today, and tomorrow it might be different, right? It's been that way the whole season, hasn't it? I mean, You can really see times where he seems to be doing a good job given the personnel that he's had to work with, and so I'll be honest with you, Dave. It's going to be Kevin Stefanski's call. And I think, Kevin understanding maybe better than any of us what Joe has had to deal with in terms of, losing his three starting middle linebackers, all of whom, by the way, were your play callers, right? Given that your front office gave you what they gave you on the interior of that defense, given the fact that you did start the year with those communication problems and you cleaned them up. Now, granted, have they been bad at stopping the run? Beyond bad. Again, though, I think it is more about personnel than it is Joe Woods there. I know he's likable, I think he still does command some respect and has some presence within the team. Clearly there's going to have to be a shakeup of some kind, right? I mean, that's just the way it goes. Then you're going to have to, everybody's got to be accountable, and ownership is going to demand answers. And if they don't hear what they want to hear, then Joe Woods may have to go. I think the guy has done a good job. I think there's been times where you can question some of the decision. I think you can do the same thing about Kevin Stefanski offensively. But it's going to be interesting to see if anybody goes. It would probably be, at this point, you would think that Joe Woods and special teams coordinator Mike Prefer would be the two guys in the hot seat for very obvious reasons.
Yeah, I would agree. Before we go to break, what do you think the biggest mistake would be that the Browns could make in this offseason coming up as they try to get things kind of funneled in the right direction?
Yeah, I think the biggest mistake, and we just kind of alluded to this, would be just a complete blow up, right? A complete start over. I don't think that's necessary. I don't think it's warranted, to be quite honest, given what they've had to deal with this year. So to me, the biggest mistake that this ownership group could make, and we've seen them do this before when they haven't gotten the record that they've wanted, is to completely scrap things. And I think that would be that would just set you back even further than you already are. And as I mentioned before, I don't think they're that far away, so I don't think it has to be quite that dramatic.
Tom Withers, a reporter for the Associated Press, and I can step aside, take a quick time out. We'll continue talking State of the Browns. We'll hear from Myles Garrett. Take a look at what the Browns might need to put around Deshaun Watson to be successful moving forward. Sports for CLE. I'll be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
The Greater Cleveland Sports Hall of Fame celebrates the star athletes and notable sports figures who were born or have made their home in Greater Cleveland. It tells the story of discipline, commitment, perseverance, sportsmanship, and excellence in achievement. It encourages and inspires those who believe in sport and its direct impact on the well-being of our community. Go to clevelandsportshall.com or follow us on Twitter at GCLE Sports HOF for more details.
We continue talking Browns with Tom Withers from the Associated Press, our State of the Browns special on Sports for CLE. Myles Garrett, named to his fourth straight Pro Bowl, has been outstanding. Garrett, talking about his path, which seems to be leading towards a gold jacket in Canton.
That is definitely the route I think I'm headed if I can continue, the pace that I'm on and things that I'm doing. And I'm not saying I'm there yet. I definitely don't have a gold jacket career at the moment. But if I continue what I'm doing, pick up the pace, and keep on, continue to lead and be a good teammate, I think that could be in my future. But I have a long way to go.
Tom, I think Browns fans have been spoiled a little bit by Myles Garrett because everybody wants to know why doesn't he have 4 sacks every game. And I think it goes back to something we talked about last segment. Give him some help up front. I know when Clowney is right and playing healthy, it frees him up a little bit. But other than that, there hadn't been many people you got to worry about other than Myles Garrett.
So true, Dave. And consider the season that he's having, and he's played, probably most of it with one arm or 1.5 arms, after the car accident, which was unfortunately self-inflicted back in September. He's been playing hurt, and he has not been practicing. They've been resting him so he's ready for Sunday. And I think it's kind of a marvel that he's out there and to be as productive as he's been. As we talked about before, Dave, I'd really like to see them pair him up with somebody, a dominant tackle on that side with him. I mean, what are you going to do if you're an offense? How are you going to block him? So I think that would be big. It's pretty remarkable, and I think you're right. I think we all have been spoiled by Myles to a degree. What I've liked this year, Dave, about him is that he's made impactful plays and impactful moments. And that hasn't always been the case early in his career. You know, when they've needed a big play down the stretch, when you need that big stop, you know, Miles is either putting pressure on or coming up with the sack or you know, the tackle or whatever the case may be. So, you know, in fairness to him as well, you know, he's been dealing with, you know, the shoulder this year. He dealt with, you know, COVID and kind of the aftermath of that, where he needed breathing treatments, you know, a couple of seasons ago. And he puts it all out there. You know, he plays hard. He's led by example. I know as a media group, we've all been very impressed with, you know, Miles and just his, him kind of giving the state of the team address almost every week, you know, and he's very candid. You know, he doesn't necessarily call teammates out, but he does it in a way where he shows that he wants more out of them and he demands more out of them. And, you know, that's what Hall of Fame players are about, right? It's not just putting up those big sacks. It's leading by example on and off the field. I mean, Nick Chubb is another perfect example of a guy who'll probably be at this rate in Canton someday as well. So, yeah, I'd like to see Miles get a little bit more help. You know, I'd like to see him really make a push for Defensive Player of the Year down the stretch. If he breaks his single season sack record, which he's on track to do right now, that would certainly be, you know, bolster his resume for those kinds of discussions.
Let me ask you this. The Browns defense to me seems to be kind of reactive, maybe passive. Wouldn't you, I think they have some of the players and the skill sets to be more aggressive, to try to dictate what's going on. Do you think that's fair? Is that's just my observation? I don't want to put words into your mouth. Do you get that sense?
I do think it's fair. I do think it's fair, Dave, but I also think it gets back to what we talked about earlier in terms of, so you're Joe Woods, right? Early in the year, you've had communication issues on defense. So you would tend to you would play a little bit softer there, right? You would not want guys to be getting beat or selling out on blitzes where suddenly you're going to expose guys at the back end. So I think it's just been, you know, because of the way the season has unfolded, that Joe has gone from maybe being as aggressive as he would want to be to having to be a little bit more protective of that defense and kind of playing that bend, don't break kind of philosophy. But I'm with you. And, you know, I'll go back to, you know, losing Anthony Walker for the year, losing Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, losing Jacob Phillips, losing Sione Takitaki. Those were big, important pieces in the middle of that defense and guys that you can, you know, talk about guys that you can blitz off of Garrett's side and things like that. So I think they've had to be less aggressive just because of the way circumstances have unfolded this season. Yeah,
that's a very fair point and probably very accurate. Let's turn our attention to the guy they're paying $230 million for, Deshaun Watson. How do you think this offense evolves with him? And he's starting to look more and more comfortable the more we see of him.
Yeah, I think, you know, to me, that's what these last 6 games were about, Dave, is trying to, you know, knock that rust completely off of him, get him comfortable with Kevin Stefanski. You know, he's talked about how important talking football with Kevin was in him agreeing to sign here, along with 230 million other reasons. But, you know, clearly a factor, and clearly that relationship is at the core of the Browns going forward for the next year or two or more. So, yeah, I think this offense is going to continue to evolve with Watson. I still think it's important for them to identify a number 3 wide receiver. Again, you know, much like we talked about seeing defensive tackles around the league. You watch a lot of these other teams and they've got 1, 2, 3, and 4 receivers, and the Browns aren't there yet. I mean, I've been very, obviously, Amari Cooper, and I cannot possibly say enough good things about Amari Cooper. Give me about 4 Amari Coopers and let's go. So he's been fantastic. Donovan Peoples-Jones has taken the jump that they hoped this year. So that looks really good towards the future. David Bell, the rookie, has been hurt and just has not been the guy they thought he would be. And in fairness to him, he's a rookie, and there's been a lot of factors going on that have made it tough for him to really make a mark. They like this Baldwin kid that came up last week and played, and they look to him and Michael Woods, another young player, as developmental guys that could probably become that number 3 wide receiver. So I think it's important for them to identify that third guy. Obviously, we know what Kevin Stefanski, how he feels about tight ends, and Njoku and Watson are starting to get a nice chemistry together. So I think it's still about, Dave, putting some other weapons around Deshaun. And I thought it was interesting this week to hear Nick Chubb say that it's more about the Browns raising their level to Watson than him figuring out how to play with them. So that tells you that, we watch him in practice, and as soon as you watch it, Dave, you're like, okay, I get why he is an elite quarterback. I mean, the way the ball comes out of his hands, the way he moves. I mean, you could argue that he's probably the most athletic quarterback in Browns history by a mile. And so, they got their guy, hopefully for his sake and the team's sake, all this legal stuff is behind him. The situation with the league is behind him, and everybody can go forward because, finally they have answered the question. They do have their franchise quarterback. It's a matter of building the team around him now.
Yeah, and you can definitely see, we're starting to see more and more glimpses of why, he's the $230 million quarterback because of some of the things we're starting to see out on the field. Before I let you go, who are some folks you think could be gone, might not be back in that orange helmet that we like so much?
Okay, I thought you were talking about media members. I'm hoping to be back for another year. We'll see what happens. But, it's going to be interesting, Dave. They've got some decisions to make. You got guys like, Kareem Hunt, who has obviously been very vocal about his affinity for Cleveland. And obviously folks around here love him and for very good reason. He's played hard and done all the right things since signing as a free agent with the Browns. I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens on that offensive line. In terms of defensively, I think they've probably gotten all that they could out of Jadeveon Clowney. He's been serviceable more than that. Unfortunately, he's been out with a concussion, since last week. So I don't know what his plans are for the last few games, what have you. But I've been impressed with the way Alex Wright has kind of stepped up, the rookie. You look to him as potentially being your other starter at the end next year. And then in terms of the defense, there's Anthony Walker Jr. I didn't realize how valuable he was to this team until he wasn't around, in terms of his leadership, in terms of his ability to kind of get that defense settled. So he's coming off of a tough injury as well. I don't know, unless I knew medically exactly where he was in terms of his future and coming back. And same for the rest of those linebackers that have all been hurt. So listen, there's probably, I think you could probably identify 30 to 35 guys that you would say as locks to come back off the current roster. And then, this is why Andrew Berry gets paid the big bucks, man. He's going to have to figure out the next 30 guys for them.
Tom Withers from the Associated Press, longtime reporter for the Browns, Cavs, Guardians now. As always, thanks so much for the time and the insight. Appreciate it very much, Tom.
Dave, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right, Tom Withers, make sure you check him out. Always really good stuff for the Associated Press, especially regarding the Browns. We talked about Deshaun Watson, what he might look like going further. Other side of the break, Lance Reisland with a film breakdown looking how the Browns might tweak what they're doing with Deshaun Watson. Sports for CLE, our special State of the Browns edition. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
The Greater Cleveland Sports Hall of Fame celebrates the star athletes and notable sports figures who were born or have made their home in Greater Cleveland. It tells the story of discipline, commitment, perseverance, sportsmanship, and excellence in achievement. It encourages and inspires those who believe in sport and its direct impact on the well-being of our community. Go to clevelandsportshall.com or follow us on Twitter at GCLE Sports HOF for more details.
We continue talking Browns here on Sports for CLE, our State of the Browns special. Let's welcome in Lance Riesland. A little bit of film breakdown. And Lance, let's take a look at some of the things that the offense could evolve with Deshaun Watson. Obviously, when you get 11 games into a season before you get your quarterback in, you can't really change everything, and it will be an evolution on the offensive side of the ball, I would think. Is that kind of the way you're thinking as well?
Yeah, I think they're going to kind of marry what Deshaun does well, and obviously the offensive scheme of Kevin Stefanski. So I think what you're going to get is you're going to get some formation adjustments. I think you're going to get some. I think they're going to stick with their base run game, but add some RPOs and add some read game to that. You're also going to get the improv plays from him, the scramble, the big plays. So I think the scheme itself won't change as dramatic as people think. They're just going to add to it, and they're going to add some RPOs, and they're going to add some. I think they'll add pistol formation. Is kind of the first easiest kind of adjustment. Is just adding the pistol, putting that tailback behind Watson, allows them to be a little bit different than underneath center.
All right, well, let's take a look at some of the video that would marry that, and this is kind of one of the things that you think could be kind of tweaked into a pistol formation. Take us through that.
Well, this is the Browns' base play. It has been their base play for the last 5 years. It's an outside zone fake. Everybody's going to sell zone to the right, and it's a levels concept. And there's a bunch of different ways to get to the levels. But basically for a quarterback, there's 3 levels on the left side. So you're going to have a guy high, a guy in the middle, and a guy in the bottom. And it's a heavy run action to his right, and then he flips his hips. This could be easily done out of the shotgun and the pistol formation, which would give Watson the flexibility to be in the gun, which he seems the most comfortable, but still allow the Browns to get into their base run play, which is outside zone, and get into their base pass play, which is this levels concept. And they get into this levels concept a bunch of different ways with a bunch of different people in the flat, Njoku being one of the key guys here. But this is a very simple play. Same play at all levels of football. A guy in the flat, guy in the middle, and a guy over the top. And it has been very successful for the Browns over the last couple years.
It allows Deshaun Watson to kind of read what the defense is giving him and then go take it pretty quickly, correct?
Yeah, and then you also add in that fourth option with his feet. So now you're adding in, you have the first 3, you have the levels, which you always take that first level if you got it. And now you add the feet into it, which now he becomes a run threat. So now it's a play that it's a base play by simply adding the pistol formation with Chubb behind and adding his feet. You've made that play a lot more dynamic.
So the other thing that this will do, QB influence in the run game, and this is what you're talking about, RPO, run pass options. Take us through what you see here.
Well, this gives you, so you're going to get RPOs, you're going to get read games, you're going to get scrambles. It allows him to process information that he's seeing. So this is going to be a split zone read. And by split zone, I mean they're going to run zone to the left. And usually Njoku, who is in motion here, he will be in charge of blocking that backside end. And that's called a bluff. So he's going to bluff that end, and he actually becomes a lead blocker. And by becoming a lead blocker, if that end continues to close, Watson can keep the ball and have a lead blocker almost on a design run. So it's still a zone read. It's still a base play of the Browns, an outside zone to the left. But now you've added a run to the right with your running quarterback with the lead blocker out in front. So it's a variation. It's a very good variation to a base scheme.
The other thing that does, it looks like you've got guys moving all over the place, and it's forcing the defense to defend the width of the field in addition to the length of the field.
Correct. And the big thing I like about the adjustments they can make, it won't change what the offensive line has to do. Those big guys up front are blocking zone left. And when those offensive linemen, one of the keys for offensive linemen, especially watching the Browns, is that they are very technically sound and they do the same things over and over and over. So for the offensive line, they're just blocking zone. And by simply adding Njoku on the split, that's why they call it a split zone, because Njoku's going to come around from the back. But that changes the whole dynamic of the play without having the offensive linemen do anything different. So it's variations like that are going to make the Browns very successful moving forward.
So this is another variation with the QB influencing the run. What do you see here, and what happens?
So here's a great, so it's 3rd and long here. Here's a great example of what he brings to the table in terms of improvising. So he sees there's a blitz by the middle linebacker. He understands it's going to be a 5 or 6 man pressure. And if you look at the corners and the secondary underneath, they're all in man coverage. So you have man coverage and you have safeties over the top. And that one safety rolls down to cover Njoku, which tells Watson it's true man coverage. So reading man coverage, he knows that if you get man coverage and everybody's running with, there's no one to stop him. So this is not only a great run by him, but this is great processing. And the information that he's getting is getting clearer and clearer, getting back to that 220. The more reps he takes, the more this will be easy. And the Browns really need to get easy yards. This year it's been, feels like a struggle when they're playing in terms of getting first downs at times. These are easy yards, and these are easy first down pickups for a guy like Watson.
And again, if you're going to play man-to-man against them, that's one of the things you're going to have to continually worry about is if you get after it and your linemen get too far up, he's taking off.
And that is probably those 3rd medium runs by an NFL quarterback. Those are the runs. You have design runs, you have the zone reads, you have a lot of those things that are built in. But those off-script runs, scramble runs for first downs on 3rd medium are the big runs that quarterbacks make in the NFL. It's the big throws they make. It's those off-platform kind of concepts where everything breaks down, but he recognizes man, and he's got the ability to go get a first down. And those are just killers for a defense.
Yeah, the Browns' defense has been on the other side of that a number of times, and it's deflating without question. All right, another variation that you could see that will be some problems would be an empty set. Take us through what we see here and the problems it presents.
What I like here is that when you're in empty, and you see this a lot when you watch him in his Houston days, is that he processes information very well. So right here, he's just seeing a zone coverage. He sees the flat defender. He sees Woods run a little pro route, a little stick route, and Njoku's going to be in the flat. And that flat defender simply gets a little bit of depth, and he just puts the ball in Njoku for an easy, 10-yard gain. It doesn't look like much, but the ball's out. He processes the information. He understands its zone coverage. And what empty does is it makes a defense declare what they're going to be in. It really makes a defense very simple and very easy to read when you have to protect it, which can be an issue at times. But in terms of what you're seeing in a secondary, it gives you a clear picture. And he processes information very well, and then he takes that information and turns it and uses his arm talent. And that's kind of what's made him a top 5 guy back when he was with Houston.
And the way I kind of described that the last game was it looked effortless, and it was because he was recognizing it, and there's literally nothing a defense can do because it's out so quickly.
Yeah, and when you say effortless, that's the combination of processing and arm talent. So you're absolutely right. So his ability to see what he's seeing and then just make a catchable ball. And all his balls are not thrown 100 miles per hour. They have the perfect touch on them. They're very catchable. They're out front. So yeah, that's what you see from him when you terms of those 3rd down runs and those being in empty and being able to make a guy miss on the boot and waggles. Those are all high level skills that he has that he makes look very easy. That throw right there, that's an opposite hash. He's throwing an arrow route. Not the easiest throw, not the hardest throw for an NFL quarterback, but not the easiest either. So he makes all those things look really, really easy. And I've always said this, if a quarterback knows where he's going with the football, the throws become a lot easier. And he is starting to see the information in front of him. Still has a ways to go, still missing some stuff, but it's getting back to where it's becoming very fluid for him.
Another one, he does have an elite arm, and this next one kind of shows us. Take us through how special this one is.
Well, this would be one of the levels concepts I'm talking about off play action. So another variation just to start is that they don't completely boot him out like they do us up. So they're still faking their outside zone. The offensive line doesn't care, which is always my key. The offensive line is faking zone left, and that's they want to have the same rules. So he's actually going to fake zone left. He's going to roll, semi-roll to his right. So from the right hash, he's going to throw a 15-yard out to the left boundary. It's really hard to put into words how incredibly gifted and talented this is. This is a very few NFL quarterbacks can make this throw in general, but make it look this easy. It's a very hard momentum. He's got to plant his feet. He's got to, he's got to get his weight going forward, transfer that weight. This is hard to put in. This looks easy. Like you said, he makes things look easy. This is about as high level as you get at the NFL in terms of throws, angles. There's not a lot of room there. There's good coverage. It's super impressive.
Yeah, that window was really small, and he put it right. It's almost over the defender's shoulder and into his receiver's hands. All right, there's obviously some things that he's going to have to improve on. Take us through what you see in this clip that they're working on, that he will work on.
So this is the first drive, their first 3 and out last week against the Ravens. So this is second play. First play, he actually misses an RPO to Cooper. This is the second play of the game offensively. And if you look at the bottom of the screen, you have Njoku and Bryant. They're going to run a high-low. And if you, right when at the bottom of the screen, you're going to see Bryant sit right there and he's wide open. And when you stop the film, he's looking right at Bryant. And those are things that just come from reps. So he's going to feel more comfortable with the depth of Bryant, where he's going to be, where Njoku's going to be. So as he reads that, the guy, a very easy read. The flat defender sits on Njoku. He's got to throw it right past his ear, right to Bryant in that window. And those are things he's getting better at, but he's not quite there. The good thing you like to see is he scrambles. There's an opportunity to make a big play. But those are a couple windows. So this first drive, he actually missed a couple. He missed 3 in a row, and then started seeing it better and better.
And again, when we talk about as he gets more and more comfortable remember, he's in Kevin Stefanski's offense for the first time as well. So that will come with being in this offense. The more that he does it, the more he will recognize it and will become second nature to him. We saw that with his Texans offense.
Yeah, and it's the verbiage coming from the, getting in and out of the huddle, all that huddle process that he hasn't done a long time. And then it's how people run their routes and the depth that people run their routes, and what are the tells when they sit down in windows, and do they understand? Are they seeing man in zone coverage like he is seeing man in zone coverage? And those all come from reps over and over and over, understanding each of your receivers, what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are. That's just repetition. That's practice repetition. So when you hear about him having good days at practice, that means that timing is starting to click, that understanding what teams are trying to do to him coverage-wise. He's starting to see that, and it's getting better and better.
All right, last clip we have a curl flat. Take us through what you see with this.
So here's another one. So you can get Felton here. He makes a really good completion to Felton. So what I like is that he's unsure, so he takes a completion. So it's going to be 2nd and 5, really, really good. If you see at the bottom of the screen, again, DPJ is going to run a curl route right where the yellow line is, and he's wide open. And that, again, is reps. So that, again, is understanding what you're seeing, the depth of routes, and where people are going to be. I would say by the end of this season, going into next year, this will be a concept they run with orbit motion, and it's a simple curl flat combination, and you get to it a bunch of different ways. But he doesn't see DPJ wide open. I think with more reps he'll get. So again, this is that first 3 and out. It's a very good throw. What you like about it is that he throws the ball, he gets a good 5 yards. So it's 2nd and 5 now, or 3rd and 5, or whatever that may be. So even though he didn't make the big play, he made a good throw and allowed his tailback to get some good yards here to make it 2nd and 5. But if you watch it, the corner widens and he should go to the second level, which with reps he will do.
Any doubt in your mind that he is kind of made for this? We heard him talk earlier in the week, actually it was last week, about how comfortable he is and how he wanted to play in this system and how he understands how effective he can be in this system. Any doubt in your mind that that he kind of takes back off to where he was after he gets a little bit more comfortable in Kevin Stefanski's system?
Actually, I have no doubt. And the thing that I think will really help him and help the Browns is if they stay fundamentally sound in terms of their run game, not dropping back every single play, but still relying on that run game to open up everything else. Then you add in the empty, the 2x2, the things that make him successful. But things we talked about earlier with the pistol and different things, the run game, to kind of get his juices flowing early in the game. But in terms of schemes, this is a perfect scheme for him. He has a really good running back, multiple good running backs. He has a really good offensive line. The offensive line will get better and better. People always say, well, they're not running the ball. Well, everybody knows they're running the ball. You're going to get more balance, more and more balance with Watson at quarterback. So they're going to be teams aren't going to be able just to stop the run. They're going to be less people in the box. So I absolutely have no doubt with his arm and his feet and his ability to process information that this offense has a chance. You got to go out and do it. As football coaches will tell you, you have to go out and do it. But on paper, this seems like a very, very good fit for Watson.
Lance Reisland, as always, great stuff. Thanks so much for the time and the insight. Appreciate it very much, Lance.
Always. Thanks for having me.
Lance Reisland, make sure you check him out. Pages of the Plain Dealer, as well as cleveland.com. Always really, really good insight on the film breakdown. We're going to step aside. We will continue with our State of the Browns. Scott Petrak, Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle-Telegraph, as well as brownzone.com. Straight ahead, our special edition State of the Browns on Sports4CLE continues. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
The Greater Cleveland Sports Hall of Fame celebrates the star athletes and notable sports figures who were born or have made their home in Greater Cleveland. It tells the story of discipline, commitment, perseverance, sportsmanship, and excellence in achievement. It encourages and inspires those who believe in sport and its direct impact on the well-being of our community. Go to clevelandsportshall.com or follow us on Twitter at GCLE Sports HOF for more details.
We continue talking Browns, our State of the Browns to finish up the year. Let's welcome in Scott Petrak, Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram, as well as on brownzone.com. Scott, when you look at this season, what have been some of the biggest disappointments? I mean, everybody thought this was a playoff team, and it just hadn't happened.
Yeah, I mean, it starts there, right? It starts with the record. It starts with not being able to, make that run to the playoffs like I think people hoped, maybe even expected. Then if you break it down, more individually, it's all about the defense and the special teams. I thought those were the two areas that were expected to kind of prop up the offense when Deshaun Watson was suspended, and they just failed to do that more times than not, or at least too many times. And, it wasn't just the defense. I think the special teams was just as culpable, but that's where I would start.
Yeah, I mean, did we have unrealistic expectations, given that you were going to start a backup quarterback for 11 games? And he wasn't, I'm with you, he wasn't the problem.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think no, because I thought the roster was talented enough. Now, maybe we did, or maybe I did, overestimate how good the roster was. Certainly at some, spots, it really turned out to be not good enough. Thinking about defensive tackle, that jumps to mind. I think that would be the first area that I would point to. But, I still kind of feel like this team was good enough to go 10-7 or 11-6, and either of those is probably good enough to go to the playoffs. But they failed at critical times. You had the secondary breakdowns early, then you had the terrible run defense for a stretch of games that really affected the playoff chances. So, I think Jacoby Brissett, like you mentioned, exceeded expectations, but I think there were letdowns from positions that were good enough, or just in general from the team, which I felt was good enough, in key moments did not play well enough, and that resulted in losses to the Jets and the Falcons and the Chargers, and you really only need one or two of those to swing the entire season.
Yeah, that's a very fair point. So when you look forward, what questions have to be answered, do you think? What are the critical ones that you look back and go, man, they got to figure this out?
Yeah, I mean, I think it starts with Deshaun Watson, right? Is he the right guy? Because I think we probably can all agree that he's talented enough. Is he the right guy in Kevin Stefanski's system? Or is Kevin Stefanski's system the right one for Deshaun Watson, right? Because Watson's not going anywhere. And the early signs are yes, it is. But I think that's a key. You need to know that if, you're the Browns ownership and front office to say, yeah, we have the right marriage of coach and quarterback. I think that's really important. And then, I mentioned defensive tackle. I know the Browns don't place a ton of importance on the position, right? It's not a key priority. They're never going to put huge resources into that. But I think they probably learned a lesson this year that what they have isn't good enough. So how do you shore up that inside? Is it just one guy? Do you get like one proven veteran and he's going to be enough of a difference? And then probably, receiver. I think as well as the offense played, I think there were times where you look out and say, hey, they're not getting enough from their number 3 receiver. And yes, David Bell's a rookie. They have some other guys that are young. That feels like an area they could address.
All right, before we move on from that, think about this. Matt Ryan, not good with the Colts. Russell Wilson, boy, that is a match that is not good as well. So Deshaun Watson at least looks to be progressing in this system, whereas the other two, it's kind of been all over the place.
Yeah, no, I mean, he's about a decade younger than those 2 other guys, right? So I think that probably makes a big difference. But yeah, I don't think there's anything you've seen early in the Deshaun Watson era that makes you think he's not going to get back to the player he was in 2020 when he led the league in passing yards and yards per attempt and yards per completion. The key is, can he put, I don't want to phrase this the right way, how does he move past everything that he had to deal with? And deal with it probably isn't the right word, but everything that was brought upon himself, whatever, the off the field situation, how does he process that as he moves forward? And it feels like he's doing a good job with that. But to me, that remains the question, because I don't have any issue or doubts about his talent or his ability at all.
Yeah, I would agree, and there have been other people. Ray Lewis comes to mind who had things, and he was able to move beyond his personal things. So I'm with you. Let's see how that plays out. Let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Yeah, I'm Damien, big Browns fan for years, diehard. I really, really feel as though like it's a lot of talent on the team, but Joe Woods got to go, and I want to know who qualifies for that job. If it ain't Zimmer, I don't want to see nobody else. I want to see an older guy, experienced, old school, smash nose. Football on the defense side. Offense is perfectly fine. I think the defense needs work next year's Super Bowl.
As always, appreciate all the voicemails. So let's assume that they move on from Joe Woods after the end of the season. Zimmer just signed on to be like the defensive coordinator with Colorado and Deion Sanders. That doesn't mean he couldn't take a job with the Browns. Qualities, what would you look for? I want them to get a guy like a Bill Callahan on the defensive side of the ball. Guy that's been a head coach, has been around. Somebody that can be a resource in-game, game planning for Kevin Stefanski.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I would agree with you. I had never gone that far. I just thought of, you want a proven guy, right? Somebody that comes in and has a lot of credibility, just with himself and with the coaches, but also with the players, right? They look in and say, hey, this guy's got a big-time resume. We can trust him. We're going to buy in immediately. That stands out to me because Joe Woods had been a coordinator once before with mixed results with the Broncos. So if you brought in a guy that's done it before, I just think that probably goes a long way. But yeah, your point's well taken. Another veteran or another veteran guy with head coaching experience that Kevin Stefanski can lean on a little bit. I think that's a good idea as well.
Let me ask you this: Do you think they go out and find somebody who that just the system is different? It seems to me like this defense is very passive. It doesn't get after it. Is that by design?
I think it is. I think it is by design. I've never gotten the sense that Kevin Stefanski wants to run a defense that just all-out pressures all the time. It just doesn't. To me, it doesn't feel like his style. I think he wants to run the ball and control the clock and play a little bend but don't break on defense. Now, maybe he's going to change it. Maybe if you think, hey, you got Deshaun Watson, you're going to score a bunch of points. Let the defense create plays early, and then maybe you get conservative as the game goes on. That'll be interesting. I certainly don't want to see a big shift from 4-3 to 3-4 because I just don't think you're built for that, especially with Myles Garrett. Myles Garrett is the prototypical 4-3 edge rusher, and I don't think you want to mess with that. So I think you got to keep the 4-3 now. Do you go more Tampa 2? Do you go more, zone blitzes? Do you just say, hey, we're going to play press man because we trust Denzel Ward and Martin Emerson Jr. and Greg Newsome? I guess you could say that. But it would certainly be a philosophical shift from what I believe Stefanski put in place a couple years ago.
Yeah, and to your point earlier, light linebackers, light defensive tackles, they were almost asking teams to run on them, and I think they found out this year, if you ask teams to run on it, they're going to say, okay, sure, we'll run on you.
Yeah, it's really interesting because you watch that Ravens game, Watson's first home game, and they gave up almost 200 yards. But they gave up 3 points because they made a bunch of plays in the red zone, right? They get a 4th down stop. Denzel Ward has an interception. John Johnson not in the red zone, but he's got a forces a fumble and recovers it. Like, you can win that way, but it feels like it's harder to win that way. And the Browns weren't doing that early in the year, right? They weren't creating any takeaways. So, I think their formula wound up not being the correct one. And I think linebackers probably fine, because they had so many injuries, right? Anthony Walker Jr., I think, can play at this level. JOK, I think Sione Takitaki proved he can. Now, he's a free agent. He's coming off the ACL. All these guys are coming off injuries. So that's why I go back to the D tackles saying, especially if you're going to have the fast, quick linebackers, you better have some guys in front of them. And the Browns just don't have that.
Yeah, you need guys, and they don't have to be all pros. They have to be guys that are going to absorb double teams and let the fast linebackers run. Do it the linebackers. That's all you need. All right, let's move on to this. And I know you wrote an article about this. The fan base seems really divided, to me surprisingly so, about Kevin Stefanski. Take us through that and kind of, I know you wrote about, your thoughts on Kevin Stefanski and kind of analyzing it.
Yeah, actually, I wrote about it, and so did Jim Ingram. And Jim's was kind of saying how there's two sides. Either you love him or you hate him, right? You need it. You say he's got to come back or you don't. And then I wrote about how I thought the win over the Ravens was a huge step for Stefanski and this team because, they were not mathematically eliminated, but all but eliminated from the playoffs with that loss to the Bengals. So, to me, that's always a question. How's the team going to respond? And if you don't respond in a positive way, and if you don't play with effort and intensity, then that's a bad sign on the coaching staff, right? And then I think that opens a lot of questions within the organization. And it looks like you're dysfunctional if your team's not playing hard. Well, I thought they answered that against the Ravens. Now, they need to continue to do that. But I thought that was a big step for Stefanski. And, if your record is close to what it was a year ago, then, and you had all the turmoil at quarterback, it just seems like it would be a really extreme, let's go with that one, extreme move to change coaches, right? A coach that has a winning record, a coach that has provided stability. I know that his even keel personality rubs some people the wrong way, some fans the wrong way, and they want more, excitement, more anger on the sideline. But I do think in the long haul, there's a lot of good things that come from having take the same approach day in and day out that Kevin Stefanski just never deviates from.
Yeah, fans might think that's interesting. Players, I don't think. That's usually how you lose a locker room, is when you're all over the place. That's the quickest way to get guys that are getting beat up on Sundays to kind of turn their shoulder. Let me ask you this. I haven't had a problem at all with his play calling. Nobody's going to agree with everything. I mean, there are certain plays. The thing that kind of I question sometimes is kind of the the game management. Is there a way to, could you see them saying, your play calling's fine, but man, the game management has to, how can we get the game management better?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think I'm with you about the play calling. I don't think that's an issue at all. There are certain plays you'd want back, but that's with every play caller anywhere. So I think overall he's been really good as a play caller. The game management thing is interesting. You look at the end of that Jets game, jumps to mind. Maybe that's part of the change if they make the change as special teams coordinator. Because I know that's Mike Prefer, that's part of his job, is to really consult with Stefanski on those things. When to take time out, when to challenge. Probably, hey, let's take a knee here, right? Let's not score. I think the guys in his ear, but also Mike Prefer, are supposed to help Kevin Stefanski in that area. So if they make a change as special teams coordinator, maybe that's part of it, is you bring in a guy either with head coaching experience or with more game management experience. I could certainly see that. when we talk about like Kevin Stefanski's deficiencies, I don't think that's not a make or break one. Like I don't think that's, to me, I wouldn't make a move just because of those things. But I get if you want to try to upgrade that area.
Yeah, no, I'm not, and I'm firmly in the side of do not make a move with your head coach. But yeah, I do want to see that area of his coaching improve. I think it has to. Scott Patrick and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out, take a look more at some personnel. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students, kindergarten through 12th grade, can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
The Greater Cleveland Sports Hall of Fame celebrates the star athletes and notable sports figures who were born or have made their home in Greater Cleveland. It tells the story of discipline, commitment, perseverance, sportsmanship, and excellence in achievement. It encourages and inspires those who believe in sport and its direct impact on the well-being of our community. Go to clevelandsportshall.com or follow us on Twitter at GCLE Sports HOF for more details.
We continue talking about the state of the Browns with Scott Petrak, Browns beat reporter from the Elyria Chronicle Telegram. You can also check him out on brownzone.com. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Yeah, hi, this is Ron Cornett from Cleveland again, and I want to talk today about the whole state of my Browns, my beloved Browns since 1963. We're going backwards. Seriously, we are going backwards. And the only way we're winning games at this point right now is with the good players that Dorsey picked up. He's with the Detroit Lions, and even the Lions have a better record than we do. So maybe Barry, I don't know if he's better at picking talent in the NFL. Maybe he should stick with what he's really good at, and that's taking care of the salary cap. I just think when it comes to GMs, you want somebody that's either played the game or somebody that's been around the game their whole life and can really evaluate talent. Because, like I said, I love the Browns, but they need to do something about the talent that's coming in because we are getting worse each year, not better. So, go Browns, woof.
As always, appreciate all the voicemails. Scott, when you look at Andrew Berry's drafts, I guess there are some questions, without question. But again, he's a young GM. By and large, I like what he's done. Just your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting conversation. I think it's a little revisionist to think that John Dorsey was great at the talent evaluation and even, perfect, like he didn't make any mistakes. I mean, he drafted Baker Mayfield number 1 overall. It's a pretty big mistake, right?
Freddie Kitchens.
Some of the guys. Yeah, Freddie Kitchens is a great, right? I mean, those are 1-2, right?
Yep.
1-2. Okay, why is he not here anymore? I do think it's fair to question some of Andrew Berry's moves. There's no doubt about it. And it's some of the draft picks, is Jed Wills ever going to be good enough? Is a number 10 pick? I think that still needs to be answered. You look at some of Grant Delpit. I don't think Delpit's had a great year. He's a second-round overall pick. A second-round pick. You look at some of the free agent moves. Austin Hooper, right, was not very good in 2 years, and then they cut him. John Johnson III made some plays against the Ravens. Has he been as good as you thought when he was your number 1 free agent pickup in 2021? I would say no. So I think the jury's still out on Andrew Berry. Having said that, I would not, I'm not at the point where I think you need to make a move there. But it bears watching. He's going to need to draft better, especially not having a first-round pick in the next couple of years. He's going to have to figure out a way to fill some gaps in this roster, like we mentioned. Maybe defensive tackle, receiver. There's going to be other ones, linebacker. How's he going to do that with no number 1 picks and then shrinking salary cap availability because they have a lot of big contracts? So he's charged with some tough jobs, but I think he deserves a chance to try to figure it out.
Yeah, I would agree. Without question, some of the picks, they have to develop and they have to come through that. Donovan Peoples-Jones looks like he was a steal where they got him. Martin Emerson looks really good. I hesitate with rookies because I was saying the same thing about Greg Newsome and Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, and they've either plateaued or taken a step back, maybe due to injury in some instances, but let's wait and see. When you look at this roster, there's some questions. Who do you think some guys that might not be back coming, you're looking at?
Yeah, I mean, Jack Conklin's a free agent. He's played pretty well at right tackle. He dealt with a foot injury for a while. Those guys are valuable. The Browns going to pay him to stay. Does somebody else want him? Maybe they could get him on a short-term deal for not crazy money. If you don't, do you think James Hudson III can just step in? I don't know. That seems like a pretty big if to me. So Conklin is like at the top of my list of guys to watch. They got to figure out backup quarterback. Jacoby Brissett, I think, will go find a better job somewhere, a spot where he's got more opportunity to play. Is Kellen Mond the guy? He hasn't played at all. I don't know. They probably need a backup quarterback. I would assume Jed Wills comes back and Jed Wills Jr. comes back and you're starting left tackle. But do you guarantee that fifth-year option? Do you pick that up? It's guaranteed money. When he's, like I said, he seems like a bit of a question mark. What do you do at the other end spot, opposite Myles Garrett? Jadeveon Clowney plays hard, but hasn't had the sack production that he did a year ago. It's getting up there. He's kind of a different dude. And for a couple of years, I've been saying they need to get that bookend to Myles Garrett. And they went with Clowney on 2 one-year deals. I feel like you kind of got to address that position more long-term. Doesn't feel like, to me, Alex Wright's that guy as a rookie. I think he can play in a rotation. I don't think you hand the starting job to him. So what do you do there? Because that's a huge role on this team, is that end opposite Myles Garrett.
The other one would be John Johnson. And do you go out and get a true free safety? Because you're asking guys to play. It's just not what he does well. You shouldn't do that.
Yeah, it's interesting because they thought that that's what he was going to do, right? I mean, they went and got him because that's what they thought he could do. And then he really hasn't. And, I think Delpit being opposite him and struggling probably hasn't helped Johnson. That's a good question with both those guys is, do you feel like you need to upgrade over both of them? And it's tough when you would say that as an organization because you spent big resources on both those guys, right? John Johnson's a 3-year, $34 million deal almost. Grant Delpit, your second-round pick. After a couple of years, and it'll only be 2 years for each guy, do you say, hey, we got to go upgrade these guys and either give up on them or spend more money? Johnson, I think, has like a $12 million dead cap if you cut him after this season. So those are certainly questions. I'm glad you brought them up. I'm just not convinced that they'll move on from those guys, from especially Johnson. But it's an interesting discussion.
All right, before we let you go, let's look at Deshaun Watson and kind of the evolution. Do they have to tweak what they're doing in the run game? Because Watson functions better out of the shotgun. Nick Chubb functions better when the quarterback's under center. That affects blocking. There's a whole domino effect that goes on with those.
Oh, there certainly is. And we've seen those growing pains, right? You saw them immediately when Watson entered the lineup. The run game wasn't the same. Now, I do think that that's something that gets fixed with more time, whether that's, you spend the whole offseason, it's a preseason, whatever it is. I think that can be addressed. I don't know what the happy medium is. My guess is Nick Chubb figures out a way to run better out of the shotgun, and the line gets more experience doing that because it's your quarterback, and you got to do what your quarterback likes best and feels most comfortable in. If that's the shotgun, then you go a bunch of shotgun. And I think Nick Chubb is good enough to figure that out, but it's certainly not automatic because there have been growing pains. There's no doubt about that.
All right, before I let you go, last question. Have you seen enough? I see glimpses of what this offense can be with Deshaun Watson, and projecting it forward, I'm like, this is probably going to work the way they envision it. Do you get that sense, or are you still skeptical? You watch a whole lot more than I do.
No, I do get that same sense. I think it needs to show up in more big plays. Like, we haven't seen that, and part of that could be the weather. I think a big part of that is you don't want to give him too much to do right when he comes back, right? Hasn't played in 700 days, all that. But that feels like the next step for this offense is down the field, explosive plays. I think there's still it's a work in progress. How you fit him in, is that running, that running threat? Because you got to get those DNs to believe that he could keep the ball. Because how many times have we seen those guys come crashing down and get Chubb or Hunt from behind? And it's because you don't trust that the quarterback's going to keep it. So I think they'll figure that stuff out. But, when you watch offenses with the dynamic quarterbacks across the league, whether it's, Lamar Jackson when he's healthy or, Justin Fields, right? You see the threat that a big-time running quarterback can be. And Watson's a better thrower than those guys. So, yeah, I do see that this offense will get to that point. I do. Maybe got to add another couple of pieces. But, assuming he's the guy that he's back to being himself, then there's no reason to think it won't be.
Scott Petrak, as always, man, thanks so much for the time and the insight. Appreciate it, Scott.
Thanks, Dave.
Scott Petrak, make sure you check him out. BrownsZone.com on the internet. He is also the Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle Telegram. That's going to do it for this edition of Sports4CLE, our special State of the Browns edition. Have a great night, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow at 4 on Sports4CLE.